welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et re-bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and in this video I will be doing a review, if you will, for the first season of the TV adaptation of Foundation produced by Apple TV+. Now, I did a first impressions video for the first 2 episodes of Foundation 6 weeks ago now, I think it was. I definitely invite you to check that out if you don't want any kind of spoilers for the first season of Foundation, because while I'm not going to go out of my way to spoil plot points and developments, I'm also not going to censure myself too harshly either. Also, a quick reminder that I have not, in fact, read Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I've never read anything by Isaac Asimov, though I might just read the first book next year. So I went into this TV adaptation as a non-fan of the source material. I will not be able to evaluate this TV show on its adaptational merits, and the quality of it as an adaptation did not, impact how I enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. So first, visually speaking, I don't have ultimately that much to add to what I stated in my first impressions video, actually. I think the production value was solid, though after a certain point, I guess I was a bit surprised by the lack of variety in the, planetary environments or cultures put on display in the show, but it was good overall. The religious / power related imagery I think was handled well. Not original, you get a lot of that in Dune obviously, and it's like nothing new really, but I thought it was decently executed. The imagery with Synax, also that water-covered planet with the rings around the planet, I thought that was very beautiful. The jump drives were really cool looking, I'm gonna give that to the show. I really liked the design for this psychohistory polyhedron thing, the vault, and they have similar lattice structures. Those things were visually appealing, though ultimately perhaps a wee bit empty given I was left wanting with regard to the wider world building and theming. And I do have to mention this, though that's a tiny part of it, but the few CGI creatures you kind of see, alien animals, were alright. That wasn't obviously the focus of the show. It's a tiny detail, but that was less impressive, interesting, but I guess it wasn't meant to be either, so fine. Generally, just like I said in my first impressions video, I felt like Foundation's visual signature was a mix of originality and recycled things, which in and of itself is fine. I like the original bits. The recycled bits, some of them were well executed, some of them felt a bit old and tired. OST-wise, there again, I don't really have anything major to add to what I said in my first impressions video. There were a couple of major musical themes, one that tended to accompany Gail Dornick, one that tended to accompany the Empire plotline, and actually stuck in my mind to a certain extent. So whilst it wasn't the most extraordinary music, I have to acknowledge it for actually sticking in my mind, and I would find myself kind of humming some of the notes because there's something to them. There's melancholy and quite elegance there. So good job overall. Character / acting wise. So quick reminder that I'm not necessarily the most character driven reader / consumer of media, though perhaps I can pay more attention to character in cinematic creations. Maybe, I'm not sure, and I might not be the most astute critic when it comes to evaluating acting skills beyond extremely good and extremely bad, so take all of this with a grain of salt, as you should always do in any case. I thought the performances were good enough. Some were more noteworthy than others. Obviously, I really liked Jared Harris as Harry Seldon. I really liked the character. I found the character of Gail Dornick interesting, but then that's also because I found those plot lines interesting. The way I related or was engaged by the characters was largely a function of their developing plot lines as well. So Gail Dornick I found interesting as a character. I thought she was well acted. I found the Empire plotline quite engaging. I thought the actors who represented the different age stages of Empire, I thought they were well acted and well executed. I really liked well, again, like might not be the right word, but I was quite intrigued by the character of Demoiselle. She was more of a side character, but there was something there that I wanted to learn more about, and I was a bit left wanting, because I feel you could develop that character further, and they very well might, in season 2, and her relationship to Empire and the different ages of Empire. The most engaging part of her character arc in season 1 was definitely the way she relates to religion, actually. An AI that is religious and how that can conflict with her programming. I thought there was something there, and I wanted more of that, but I didn't get quite enough of it. Overall, I cared way less about the Salvor Hardin plotline and this general plotline that took place on Terminus with the colony and then with Anacreon and Thespis. Not saying the actress did a bad job incarnating that character, but I was just less convinced by it. The most interesting, though, character dynamic, I would say, was between Gail Dornick and Harry Seldon. You don't get that much of it overall, I suppose, but again, it was a character dynamic that I actually somewhat cared about or was able to focus on. The romance elements, I mean, the one in the first couple of episodes was not that good. There's a bit of a romance element to Salvor Hardin's relationship with, can't even remember his name. And then there's sort of a romance, but is it really? If you've watched it, you know that isn't. Between Dawn, or I mean the Dawn aspect of Empire, and this gardener woman, that was actually moving to a certain extent because it really relied on this deep naivete of Dawn and his feeling of being alone and of not fitting in, his destiny and his role as part of the Empire. So there's something there that was touching, but that has a pretty sad outcome. So again, with regards to those plot lines, at the risk of repeating myself, I found the Empire plotline and the one interweaving Harry Seldon and Gail Dornick together, the most engaging ones. The one with the actual foundation on Terminus and this whole thing between Anacreon and Thespis was a bit generic to me. I couldn't really care that much. I mean, ultimately, some of it comes together. The thing is, the pacing itself is kind of wonky in places. Now, I know that at least book 1 of Foundation, they're huge time jumps, right? I think they wanted to translate that a bit in the TV show, but it feels a bit weird at times. You'll have these big jumps into the future mediated by space travel and characters waking up 100 years into the future, and then you have this whole thing with Harry Seldon's digitized consciousness. I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but that's how I understood it. So it felt a bit jarring at times. Not too jarring either, but a bit rough around the edges, I think. And I felt the Terminus plotline really suffered at times from that, and just this conflict between the two planets felt really tired in a way, and plot twist, spoiler, but learning that the Foundation is just a means to accelerate psycho-historical development by orchestrating a rebellion against the Empire, that just felt very old and disappointing, because I was like, but what about the accumulation and preservation of knowledge? I actually like that idea, and I'm not saying that idea will be completely put to the side, but I was just kind of disappointed because it was replaced by something so generic in a way. So that was pretty meh for me. Whereas I thought there was more nuance and potentially thematically interesting things going on with the Empire plotline. I mean, ultimately there is still a bit of mystery with Harry Seldon's grand plan, maybe, and there's a bit of a mystery going on with Salvor Hardin's and Gail Dornick's prescient abilities, which again, I'm like, what are you doing there? With the Empire plotline, I felt like some ideas were being explored that weren't too pedestrian in a way. And I mentioned prescience, that touches upon some elements of the world building which I wasn't sure what to make of. So moving into the world building, again, not that much to add to what I said in my first impressions video. I liked seeing a couple cultures and planets and things like that, though ultimately I think it ended up focusing on a couple sets and you stay with them, which was fine. But I wasn't too convinced about those pseudo-prescience elements which are brought up. So I said to myself, okay, so we're going to play around with that then. So we don't just have psychohistory, which is like huge data analysis. We're actually going to have genuine pseudo-prescience. Okay, maybe? And then genetic memory, did I get that right? I was like, oh, come on, no, not again, not genetic memories. I wasn't too enthusiastic about those elements. I wanted to focus more on the more sciencey or hard sciencey bits, or hard science fiction-y bits, you get what I mean. Beyond that, though, moving directly into the theming, I suppose, this is basically my overarching conclusion. I was left wanting. There were these little crumbs there. These little crumbs kind of dropped along the TV show of big ideas. But ultimately, it all felt pretty light for me. I was left wanting a more substantial thematic meal, especially given that I understand Foundation to be primarily about concepts and ideas, like a lot of classic, older, harder science fiction is supposed to be. And it wasn't really translated that way onto the screen. Psychohistory isn't really developed all that much, or I mean, questioning the long view of history. Though, that being said, I enjoyed the opening monologues, that's what they were, given by Gail Dornick at the beginning of each episode. She drops quite a few interesting thoughts, and she reflects on things she was told. And some of that was quite deep, and there's a lot of comment, but like a verbal paragraph shared about history being the greatest invention of human beings. And I thought to myself, see, that's what I want. That's actually brain food right there. But then within the meat of the episodes themselves, I didn't feel like it was developed to any serious extent. However, there was something there with that Empire plotline, kind of thinking about the nature of humanity, the problems with stagnation, because this Empire figure has been cloned from an original human being for 400 years, and there's a religious movement that criticizes this, saying it's unnatural, and because there is no genetic mutation, because they are not born from parents, they don't have a soul. But then you have also this AI character, Demoiselle, who's a robot, but she believes in, I guess, a kind of god. She has a religious faith, and she feels distressed because she wonders, well, do I have a soul? Because I'm programmed to react certain ways. So there was something there. There's something there intertwined with the AI and her relationship to this genetic dynasty, to this tripartite empire, or emperor really, decanted, was that the word used? I can't remember, but basically fleshed out in 3 age stages. Again, I think you could develop that a lot further, but that really kept me engaged. It kept me thinking a bit, though ultimately, once again, I was left wanting somewhat. Not that I feel terribly comfortable giving a rating to a TV show like I would for books. I think I've more or less settled on a 6 to a 6.5 out of 10 for season 1 of Foundation, which isn't terrible. It's not great either. It's kind of in that middle ground of it has potential, but the potential really needs to be more fully realized for me to be enthusiastic about it. I'm not super enthusiastic about season 2 based on what I've seen in season 1. I'm not, however, against the idea of checking out season 2 whenever it releases. I was, I guess, a bit disappointed by the relative superficiality of the theming, specifically to a lesser extent of some aspects of the plotting or even the world building. That was less of an issue for me, primarily because I felt there were these crumbs, these tantalizing crumbs, and these tiny pieces of sustenance, especially with the Empire plotline. I guess it kind of felt like this very appealing husk of sugar and chocolate or something, but you bite into it and there's nothing inside, or I mean, there's very little inside, so yeah, you don't really feel that nourished, though I probably shouldn't have used a dessert metaphor for this, because that's not always the most nourishing thing, but whatever. Again, I have zero idea of how it works or doesn't work as an adaptation. I do have a bit of an inkling. I don't think a lot of people are super happy with it. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's my impression, I suppose. I haven't seen that much praise for it. Not like Dune has gotten a lot of praise, so I guess it must have been a mixed reception overall, which corresponds to my pretty mixed feelings. And in particular, I wasn't a big fan of that season ending. I thought it was pretty weak overall. It just didn't quite work for me. I saw it coming and I was like, meh. I mean, it does leave this mystery to be resolved in season 2, maybe, but the delivery was just overall a bit weak for my taste. Those are my honest thoughts about season 1 of Apple TV Plus's TV adaptation of Foundation. I'm not against checking out season 2 when it drops, but not chomping at the bit to see it either, basically. I hope you found this review useful, interesting, whichever. Hope you all have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. If you want to share your thoughts about Season 1 of Foundation, please feel free to do so. Do take good care of yourselves, and I shall see you in another video. Bye!